I kind of fell into the art. I went to new school, and I studied liberal arts and I studied music. And after I graduated, I got a regular gig, just working at the cosmetic company. And I always wanted to get into music somehow, but I didn't know anybody. I just had no idea how to get into it. But then in 2000, I did this Alaska AIDS vaccine ride, which is an event that it's a fundraising event, and you make a commitment to ride a bike from Fairbanks to Anchorage, which is about 510 miles, and you collect donation, which will go to the AIDS research. So each rider was responsible for raising minimum $5,000. And this was a time before, internet, emails. You get on the phone, you write letters to raise money. And I thought that, maybe I could do a fundraising concert. I knew few musicians, and I thought that would be the fastest way to raise a substantial amount of money. So I got a few people together. I had Sarah Jones, Corey Glover, Mark Carey, and James Hurt, and I think Roy Hargrove ended up playing there as well. And I needed the venue, so I remember this guy, Dale Fitzgerald, who ran the place called the Jazz Gallery. So I asked him if I could use his space, and he let me. So I presented this event, and it went really well. And me and Dale, we got talking about this or the other, and he asked me if I'm interested in helping out the gallery, just the basic things like setting up the space, cleaning the bathroom, taking the money at the door. So I started doing that once a week. And one thing that's another, people who know me know that I have a hard time keeping my mouth shut when I have something to say. So I started making suggestions to Dale, let's do this, let's do that, what about this, what about that? And one thing that's another, next thing you know, Dale sort of almost left me in charge of what's happening on the stage at the gallery. And so first 5 years right out of college, I thought I was doing something that has nothing to do with anything to do with music, and I thought that it was almost meaningless. But in hindsight, the cosmetic company that I was working for was a very small family business, so I got to learn so much about how the business works because of that. And so that experience actually is really feeding into how I conduct myself at the Jazz Gallery. So now that I'm a little bit older, I realized that everything had a purpose. Jazz Gallery was established in 1995 by Dale Fitzgerald and Roy Hargrove, and it runs as a non-for-profit organization, and we call ourselves International Jazz Culture Center. Over the years, the Jazz Gallery became known as a place where young professional musicians who are starting out, this is where they cut their teeth. The four of the recent MacArthur winners first started leading the band at the gallery, like Vijay Iyer, Jason Moran, Daphne Prieto, Miguel Sinon. They all sort of grew up at the gallery, and a lot of the people who won the Monk competition, long before that happened, they started at the gallery either as a side person, eventually as a leader. A lot of people who got the Doris Duke Artist Award recently. And when I started working at the gallery 14 years ago, they weren't really presenting any music on a regular basis. Dale had this idea to present the music with the art so that he will have a music when there's an arts opening. So when I got there, and when I had all kinds of ideas, I want to do this and I want to do that. But the thing was that small not-for-profit arts organization has a very, very small budget. So then I was thinking, okay, I want to present the good music, but what can I do with the budget? So then naturally I looked to people who are willing to play for the kind of money we're able to offer. So I know that Jazz Gallery is sort of known as this place the young musician cut their teeth, but that was not an intent. That was sort of I had this limitation, and I guess it ended up being that I turned the limitation into the advantage, and we sort of created the niche within the jazz ecosystem, the Jazz Gallery found a place. So, like I said, my title currently is artistic director, but I feel like I'm responsible for putting the gallery on the map and really just have nurture the venue in a way that really helped its growth. I think the opportunity and challenge sort of the both side of the same coin, because my opportunity was that, I mean, when I started working at the gallery, I had no idea what it would turn out to be, but essentially I had this venue that I can pretty much book whatever I want to and express my artistic ideas, and just to have that kind of freedom was an amazing opportunity. And then the challenge within that organization is that the budget is always really very tight, so I had to be creative to make things happen with the limitation. But then I think, like I was saying, the limitation help us to create the niche for us. So it's kind of one and the same thing, my opportunity and the challenge. Trusting what I know and really loving what I'm doing, and also just don't second guess yourself, because not so much in the beginning, but as the Jazz Gallery start to gain traction, I hear from naysayer, and I hear people with goodwill nonetheless, but have a lot of opinions about what should happen. And I start to second guess myself. Oh, maybe I should be open to all these opinions, and maybe I should do different things, or maybe I should, maybe this. And just second guessing, I realized that it always ended up being a really bad thing. So I think that what I got me here today was that even when I feel like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, I just, had trusted myself and just, work hard to make it happen. It was quite unsettling, to tell you the truth, because I feel like I really came in to be myself at the old space. That's where I learned to do what I do and created all the friendship and networks, and Jazz Gallery really blossomed in the old space, and I was really attached to it. But it's the typical New York story. The building is turning into condo. We had to move, and I really had to focus on the essence of the gallery and what's important at the gallery, which is that what we do, and container is almost secondary to that. And I also I believed in the gallery, what it became, and I believe in myself that so long as there's a decent container, we can keep doing what we're doing. And it's not without challenge, but we managed to find a space that are actually uncannily similar to the old space. There was three things I wanted from new space. I wanted the air conditioner that would cool the place in the summer. I wanted to be warm in the winter, and I wanted the elevator that's fast, because we didn't have that in the old space, and turned out that we don't have that in the new space as well. So it's new, but it's oddly familiar to us. And one advantage of the new space is that it's more centrally located, so people can get to us very easily. It's close to the Jazz Center, so people can go to the Standard, go to the gallery. So, if I started counting the things that are not good with the new space, there will be a long list. So I just have to focus on what's good about it. And the fact that we keep presenting music, we keep offering the residency commission because we have a space, and this Jazz Gallery continues to be a hub of activity. So that's what I'm focusing on. Financial challenges always. I mean, I think I have all these things I like to do, ideas, visions, but it always comes down to how much budget you have. And I think and anybody who works in a not-for-profit arts organization can relate to this, that it's always a battle, between your vision and budget. So yes, so if anybody like to donate, a lot of money to Jazz Gallery, we'll do a lot of good with it. think I was 12 when I still lived in Japan. I met this lady. She was American. She was in Japan a short period of time to teach English, and she was a little bit older. I think she was probably at her late 40s or 50s at that time, but she was just this the person full of energy, and she was carefree, and she was curious, and she was independent, and she just the way she conducted herself like really had an effect on me. That wow, people don't have to live their life in any certain way. You can do whatever you want, and somehow she instilled that in me. So she was one of the people who really inspired me. And the other person was the voice teacher that I had when I was in new school, Richard Harper. Just the way he looked at life and how everything fit. It's hard to explain. You have to meet Richard because he's just an amazing person, and he left a great impression on me as to how to conduct myself as a person. And I still, talk to him, and he always makes me feel better about me, and that's pretty amazing because I'm very hard on myself and hard on everything. So, yeah, I think those are two people who comes to my mind right away when you say that. As a person, I picked up the book called The Gift from the Sea when I was 13, and this was written by Anne Morrow Lindbergh. She was married to a guy who flew across the Atlantic, the very first person to do that. And when I was 13, I still lived in Japan, so I read that in Japanese. And then after I moved here, I bought the English version. I read it so many times, but this book has it left a very strong impression on me, that the way it talked about life and how you are to conduct yourself, and it's written in a very simple way, but it just hit all the right spot. And this is one of those books that, depending on where you are in your life, every time you come back to it, you find something new within the book. And I have read my share of a lot of sort of spiritual, new age, religious books, and this book, Gift from the Sea, sort of like, to me, any book that I read after that, any spiritual books, it pretty much says the same thing, but the way she talks about it is very plain and simple and gives you a lot of room to think about. So that will be one book that I would always hold dear to my heart. Over the years of being in the business of not-for-profits arts management, I got to meet so many people across the country who do this day in and day out, and firsthand I know it's not easy. So and then particularly in jazz, it's not easy. I guess any art form, it's not easy to do this in this country. So I think that everybody who keeps it going, everybody who keeps making this uphill battle to just keep putting their vision out there, finding a creative way to do things and keep the arts alive. Everybody's a hero to me because it's hard. Sometimes, in that sort of PSA type of thing, the people will say something about jazz being dead or jazz need to be saved, blah blah blah. But jazz is good. Jazz is just fine. It's great. Jazz is a medium that people can bring their own self to, and it can absorb and digest and expand, so that when you say jazz in 2014, they're just it includes so much that it's very hard to say this is jazz. There's a huge discussion on Facebook surrounding Nicholas Payton, and I think I don't know about name Bam because it makes me think of Emerald Lagasse, but I think the issue of acknowledging that jazz is a black music, it needs to be acknowledged. I think that I think somebody said something to the extent of, let's say if you like traditional Japanese music, anybody's welcome to play it, but it doesn't take away from the fact that it originated in Japan. So why can't we not do the same thing for this music? This jazz is a American black music. One of the big trends is that jazz is now in every single university and college, and this is something that you go for a degree. And that's one trend that I'm not too crazy about, because I don't know if it's good for jazz to be so institutionalized and put in a conservatory setting, because in its origin, jazz, it was the music that break away from the status quo. To say this is how you play jazz is against the spirit of jazz. That's what I feel, and I think jazz is about finding your own voice within it, and moving away from the status quo. And I'm not saying disregard the tradition, that's a whole different thing, because you have to know where you come from in order to move forward. But I guess this happened in any time in the history of jazz, because I know that when Miles Davis did this, people say, oh, that's not jazz. When Charlie Parker came out with bebop, oh, that's not jazz. So it happened in every generation, but nonetheless, jazz is about just moving individually and collectively. So to teach that in an institutional setting, I have my doubt, but I guess that's where things are going. So we have to do best within the setting. But aside from that, I think the Robert Glasper whole jazz and hip hop thing is a big movement right now. And if that's your thing, that's great. And I think that nobody should be saying, oh, you should do this or you shouldn't do that. Jazz gives you this structure and freedom at the same time. Find your voice, whatever that means, and do it well. And I think that's what's been happening to jazz. Everybody's just finding their way into it. And I think that's great. Just do your homework, know the music, and I think you have to know the history, you have to listen, nourish your ears. It's almost too simple, but I'm always looking for things that are honest and soulful. And the thing is, when you're on the stage and when you have instruments, it's easy to hide behind all these things, and especially with jazz, it's easy to hide behind chord changes and difficult rhythms, and it becomes about something else. And I hear a lot of music that's about music, and that's not really what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a musician who knows that music is a tool to communicate who he is, who she is, and something that's something that's bold and just makes you feel something. You have to love it. This is not an easy life, but it's a very rewarding one. But you have to really want it. And if you want to be rich or famous or important, this is not a career for you. And what I've seen in my life in jazz is that there is no formula, so to speak. You don't know what takes, what doesn't take. And at the end of the day, are you happy playing the music you want to play? So, if you love it, go for it. If you don't love it, maybe this is not for you. And when I say love, I mean, anybody who I know who is very successful, it's a kind of love that just consumes you. You want to eat and sleep and breathe jazz. And I think the jazz is one of the very few art forms that people can actually make a living, because there are a lot of opportunity for jazz musicians to play, whether in jazz or otherwise. And it's important that, if you want to be a leader and successful in that, that's a whole other story. But if you just want to make a living playing this music, that's really possible. But it's very important that you be nice to people, you show up on time, you learn the music when you get called for a gig, and then you have a career. Because oftentimes I run into musicians who are very talented, but who don't call you back, who don't show up on time, who show up and they don't know music, and chances are I don't call that person back. So it's a very little simple things, but those are very important. I had this interesting conversation with David Binney about this, how now with internet you can know what somebody's doing in West Africa in the small village and what they're working on, and you have so much information that, especially like jazz musicians, are always eager to learn new things, and they feel like they have to know everything. But Dave was saying that, but it's before this happened, everybody in a different corner of the world, they were just sitting in their own funk and they're working on the things that they want to work on, and they really like had the focus, and you pursue that without any of these distractions. And I think there's something to be said about that, because ultimately you can't do everything, and there's so many different kinds of musicians, and why would you want to do everything? You want to be you, and what makes you want to work on what makes you really special. I recently got Eric Rivas' newest CD, which was something about, he always had this cryptic title. It was Memories of Tomorrow Yet Unseen, or something of that sort. And it's really great, and I love the CD. I've also been listening to the one of the piece that we commissioned at the Jazz Gallery. It's called Marlboro by John Ellis, and this is like a libretto, so the lyrics are written by Andy Bregan, and they just we commissioned them probably 3 years ago, and they just managed to put out the CD, and it's really a beautiful piece. And I would just I love listening to that when I'm driving and go. This is the story about the it's a journey of garbage, so I'm listening to that. As for reading, I don't know what I'm reading, because iPad and Kindle is a great thing. I have so many books I'm reading all at the same time. A few of the books I'm reading is Joseph Anton by Salman Rushdie. This is a story about when he was in hiding, and a story about what happened when he was hiding from people who wanted to kill him. And then I was also rereading some of the Junot Diaz book. It's really beautiful and just makes me cry every time, but it's it's one of those stories that just grabs your heart and do this. So that's what I'm reading. And there are a few people that I'm really impressed with right now. One is Elena Pinderhughes. She's a flute player out of Oakland, and actually first time I saw her, she was 11 years old. There was a HBO special called Music in Maine, and this is a documentary HBO put together, I think 9 years ago, about young children who are very dedicated and talented, and Elena was one of them. I think she was 11 when she was in the show, and she was really impressive already. Me and my husband, who's a jazz musician, we were watching the show, and we're like, oh my god, that girl is just killing. So she grew up and she came to the city, and first time I saw her at the gallery, I think she was there to see Peter Applebaum, who is also from Oakland. He's another prodigy, but he's old now. But he used to be very prodigious. But I saw Elena and I said, "Oh my God, I know you!" I was a little starstruck when I saw Elena, and her brother Samora is really wonderful too. Also, the piano player out of Houston. This high school, Robert Glasper and Walter Smith went to. This piano player, I think he's 18 or 19. His name is James Francis. He just got to New York, and he's very talented. And I think that he's gonna blow up really quickly. Let's see. I like Victor Good. He's another piano player. He's a little bit older, but I really like him a lot. Gallery, well, we just started this new series called Mentoring Program, which is, so it used to be that young musician, this is before there was jazz school, was prevalent, young musician will get a gig with older musician, and then they go on the road and they get their behind kicked, and they learn they learn about being a professional musician, and then they learn about becoming a musician that way. But I think that there are less of those mentoring opportunities, because that's one of the drawbacks of going to school. That I noticed the kids play with each other, but they don't really get to play with older musicians in the setting that they're the only person who doesn't know what's going on. Even if you know what's going on, you still feel like you are just so little in the setting. So I wanted to recreated the experience. So this year I have Miguel Senon, Jalil Shaw, and Taylor Augustine, Jason Lindner. They are the mentor. They grew up through the jazz gallery, and they had their own bigger career. So now we recruited them as a mentor, and I paired them up with a younger musician who was just coming up. Like Jalil is currently working with Elena Pinderhughes, and I asked Jalil to put together a musician of his caliber, so that Elena will be the only person who are young in the group, and then they will have 4 gigs, 2 at the gallery, 1 at the Seed in Brooklyn, 1 at the Shapeshifter Lab. So, and then I try to book them very close to each other, so they will have a similar experience, sort of being on the road and being mentored by older musicians. And this is the new initiative that started, and it's going slowly, but from Jalil and Elena, I'm getting a really positive feedback, and I think that it's really a useful. I think it would be interesting to see what will come out of it. So we're doing the very first run this year, and then next year I have another batch of musicians. I think it was Vanya Terry, Claudia Cunha, Jonathan Blake, somebody else I forgot. But I want to keep doing this mentoring thing too, because in the beginning when the jazz guys started out, we didn't have enough older people, but now we have all these people who graduated who can. Because oftentimes what happens in jazz scene is that when you get older, you see a young person coming in, and people like to talk about, oh, these young kids are this, young kids are that, they're doing this, they're not doing that. But my thing is, okay, that's what you see, it's your job to teach them. That's how the older generation told you. So now it's your turn. If you see something you don't like, do something about it. So that's the new initiative I'm very excited about. So the Jazz Gallery has given me a great platform to become who I am in this world of jazz. But I think I have, it's ultimately not mine. This is Dale Fitzgerald's legacy, and I think that it served me greatly, and I'm so thankful for the opportunity. But I feel like it's almost time for me to step out on my own, and I would like to have my own club where I like to present the music. And it's very different from what I have in mind. Is very different from the Jazz Gallery. One of my many pet peeve is that I feel like jazz has become too bright and too legitimate and too clean, that I like to have some shady cave where people can hang out and listen to music and bring more social aspect of the jazz into it. And I think ultimately I like to create the space I want to hang out and listen to good music. So I think that's next for me. I want people to remember me as somebody who really loved this music and who did her best to make it happen.